Hi, guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, very special episode today. We've got ex Pfizer employee and whistleblower Justin Leslie. He's also worked at Project Veritas and James O'Keefe Media. He's now got his own website, Just Integrity Network, and this fantastic two-part documentary series, Project Whistleblower. So we're going to get into all the juicy stuff today, what that he uncovered, why he left, and thanks so much for joining us today, mate. I know it's late over there.
Thank you for having me, Alex. Yeah, we got the time difference, but I'm happy to get exposure to the audience and go international. I've been on several shows internationally at this point, Canada, Finland, and China, Japan. I've gotten coverage in at this point, so it's nothing new to me. So greetings to you. I suppose it's the morning there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's late for me. We were talking about the lighting and everything. It's getting late for me. But happy to come on and share this message that needs to be heard. So, like you were saying, I was a Pfizer scientist who worked directly on the COVID-19 vaccine. My official job title was formulation analytical scientist. And I was on a small scale manufacturing team, basically doing small scale analytics and doing research and development and stability studies and everything else on a small scale, rather an entry level position, you could say. And um, I ultimately transitioned into working at Project Veritas after about a year of working at Pfizer. And there is a long story behind all of this, which is where my documentary testimony ultimately comes into play. So then I worked at Project Veritas for a little less than a year doing undercover journalism, investigative journalism. And then I went to O'Keefe Media Group and I worked at O'Keefe Media Group with James O'Keefe for about 5 or 6 months or so. And then I ultimately resigned due to a disagreement on James going to Bohemian Grove in the summer of 2023. So that happened. And then I ultimately didn't want anything to do with it. And we can really get into all of this. And I resigned. I said no to a severance package that he offered me that was upwards of tens of thousands of dollars. And though ultimately to me was like hush money.
Yeah.
And I was jobless for like 7 months while I essentially worked on a testimony of this documentary testimony. I worked with a co producer of the documentary, and his name is Marty Leeds. Um, and God bless Marty for helping me put this thing together because I don't have the documentarian skills to put it all together. So um, we can totally get into all this, Alex. And then there's
Yeah.
even stuff that is like I came forward with all this in March of 2024, so it's been like a year and a half, and my story has gained traction throughout the year and a half, but it has not like blown up to where it's mainstream. And I mean, that's because, the stuff that I talk about is extremely sensitive to the point where I call out essentially people in the alternative media
Yeah.
for being essentially like CIA or some version of controlled assets. So
Yeah.
we can get into all of this.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting into it all. So let's rewind a little bit. So for those that want to know, your credentials and they can see your official positions on LinkedIn and that, give people the rundown of the background and kind of how you landed the job at Pfizer, maybe what you thought it was going to be, and then what sort of changed your mind to, well, something isn't right here.
So first, I my education starts at I did my undergraduate degree in pharmaceutical and biomedical sciences at the University of Rhode Island. I graduated in spring of 2020, kind of as this whole pandemic charade started unraveling. Where I call it Zoom University. I finished my last semester of school at URI on Zoom, essentially. So no in person classes anymore, and I just thought that was kind of ridiculous. And I couldn't find a job out of school, in this great big pharmaceutical world. And I just started looking for a master's position, actually, or a school to get a master's in. And so I felt called to go to Rutgers because I have this rare multi-system disease called tuberous sclerosis complex. And we can get into disease labels and everything else. I ultimately look at disease as kind of just a big grouping of things and poisoning of the
Yes.
body itself.
Yeah.
But long story short, that's really where all of this wanting to even be in big pharma stemmed from, was from this diagnosis that I had at the age of 10. And so I wanted to work with a professor at Rutgers, and they had done research on my disorder. Although the COVID, pandemic essentially had, a different plan in the sense that I wasn't even allowed to be on campus at Rutgers until, the vaccine rollout was going to happen. So I started Zoom University again, essentially online at Rutgers, and I was completely miserable. It was essentially a med school program that was a master's. And
Yeah.
so I was living at home, didn't want to do what I was doing anymore. It was essentially a regurgitation of what I just went through in undergrad, just maybe a little more difficult. And I was all alone doing it Zoom University style. So just miserable. And so my credentials were, half of a master's degree essentially, until I ended up applying to pharmaceutical companies to even see if I wanted to be in this industry, because I was in an awakening process like all at once, where I looked in, and I'm not a QAnon guy, but I looked at like this QAnon video and I was like, oh my god, like the whole thing is a psyop against Trump, and like I just went down this rabbit hole of just realizing how we were lied to about COVID, and there were all these political agendas involved, and you know taking a 40,000 foot step back, I got shaken awake during the master's program for sure, but it turned into a gradual awakening over time as well. And
Yeah.
so um, that's kind of why I was applying to pharmaceutical companies, just because I was so miserable. My mom said, "Why don't you apply to jobs?" And so I applied to like four companies in the area, and I thought I was going to end up at one company that was more local to me. They didn't offer me a job. Pfizer came calling in Massachusetts, and I'm from Connecticut, so I decided to take the job at the absolute last minute. They gave me 24 hours to take it. They were shocked I didn't take it right away, and I basically vetted them and asked if I could not be vaccinated essentially. And it was a contract as well with this company called Mindlance Inc. And so I was talking to the contract agency, and they said, no, you don't have to take it yet. And so ultimately I said, all right, sure. Like, I'm going to take this job. It's some money, and I'll actually go get to see what's going on in the inside, as not like legitimately go for like corporate malfeasance or like going against Pfizer to like destroy them or anything, but I wanted to see what was on the inside, and I knew that I had a perspective that probably 0.01% of people would have going into working at one of these big pharma giants during the crisis that I saw as the COVID-19 pandemic, or even genocide at this point. Like, what they did to the world was just so awful. And like what they did to Australia and every country is just horrible. Crimes against humanity, which we can totally get into on what I'm looking to do with my crimes against humanity lawsuits and everything else. So
Yeah, no,
sorry for the long
no,
tangent.
no surprise. Australia was boasting the highest vaccination rate in the world, and now we've got the highest rates of cancer in 30 and 40-year-olds. And every day my Facebook feed is unfortunately filled with friends or friends of friends that have had heart attacks or getting cancer and stuff. And half of my friends in the medical industry are kind of awake now, and the other half are still just towing the line that everything's cool and normal. And I get it. If you don't ever look outside of your box, you're never going to find the truth. Like, it's not going to get handed to you on an email from your department when you work at the hospital or as a GP. So I understand why a lot of people haven't woken up yet. But
You kind of got to get slapped in the face by it, or you just it's almost like it. My friend Kim Witzak, who I actually include in my documentary, she calls herself like an accidental whistleblower, because sometimes this stuff just comes right up on your doorstep, and it's either you confront it, or like you're saying, like if you're in the medical industry right now, you're a lot of these people are simply just avoiding the truth because they don't want to deal with the cognitive dissonance of realizing the generational traumas that have been passed down essentially within this medical system, which is really not a medical system at all. It's a system that
yeah,
is trying to essentially poison and kill you.
exactly. And a lot of people just they might even suspect something's up, but they don't want to lose their job. They've got a HEX debt and all this type of stuff, and life's good, and they've got kids to pay for. So you completely understand why this is going to be a slow process before we get consensus around this.
100%.
So what were the things that you found? What sort of things were you working on? What data did you have access to that was that light bulb moment? How did the next steps all unfold?
So before I even took this job, I reached out to the media company Project Veritas CEO James O'Keefe. A lot of people are familiar with him, especially in the United States, but I'm sure some people are familiar with him in Australia. I mean, James and Project Veritas were getting very big on a worldwide scale during 2021, 2022, and 2023. So I reached out to them before even taking this job, and I said I had intentions essentially of, helping humanity and wanting to be a whistleblower. They told me we couldn't do anything in the sense of giving you advice to take the job or not. So I took it, and what I had access to was a whole plethora of a database. And um, I basically would print out a lot of documents and just read them at home. And so I found documents linked to luciferase enzymes, and that to me is just very symbolic for like what this vaccine is. Luciferase. Like, why are you calling it luciferase, and why is it an enzyme that has to do with fluorescence and lighting up? So
Yeah.
to me, it was eye opening to see that that was even something I could find on my own, as well as just the fact that, one of the big things that I found was the lipid nanoparticle distribution of where it would go in the body. And there was an animal test that I had printed out and actually confronted with one of my higher up colleagues, where I said, this is going to the reproductive organs. Does the public know that this is happening with these lipid nanoparticles, et cetera, et cetera? Was essentially what the conversation was about. And Ramin Davari is the gentleman's name, and he said, no, like, we cannot let the public know about like that this is happening. Like, this is an animal studies. This is confidential. Like, we have to keep this on the low low. So, um,
Just
essentially,
for
that
people
was
at home quickly that don't understand what you're talking about, what we were told, the official narrative was that when you get a shot, it stays in the site of injection for a small period of time for your body to produce some antibodies after the mRNA platform gets your own cells to produce the spike protein, and then it's gone. And now we've got studies showing that it's not only distributed throughout the body in the important tissues, as you're describing, but it's still producing spike protein. Some of these studies are now 700 days on and so forth. So sorry for butting in, but that's just to get everyone at home up to speed.
no. Thank you for totally. You're good, bro. So that is just one thing, and then ultimately there was a lot more powerful information as well that I was actually able to reobtain, and then there's information that I can ultimately speak on, that is in my documentary. Before getting into it, and I can show it live on here if you want, Alex. It's on my YouTube channel and on my Rumble. If I don't know if I have screen sharing abilities, but we can
Up
totally
to you,
show
mate.
you.
If you want to, you can. Otherwise, I'll link the full documentary in your channel down below for everyone to watch later on if you just want to speak to it.
I think it's worth showing, and then we can just have a little back and forth on it, honestly.
Cool.
But essentially, these videos I'm gonna show you guys are of my higher up colleagues who worked directly on the COVID-19 vaccine, and one of them's name is Conwell Gill, who was a head of the analytical team that I worked on, and she said that Pfizer was essentially um, saying like, roll it out, roll it out, roll it out. It's not a time to think, it's a time to act. And that Albert Bourla and Ugur Sahin, who is the CEO of the BioNTech company that Pfizer was working with, essentially didn't know what's going on. And that Ugur Sahin came to Pfizer looking to formulate a mRNA vaccine back in 2018, which is just eye opening to the fact that they wanted to work together in 2018, and then 2019, 2020, they just decide to have this rollout of this, pandemic essentially, and start using this mRNA technology on the masses, when who in their right mind would have accepted a, quote unquote mRNA technology with an emergency use authorization that has never been tested before, unless it's for this, imaginary, fake coronavirus that, is essentially just fear-based propaganda from the media.
Yeah.
So I do really think it's worth watching. So I'm gonna try and pull this up.
Cool.
Um,
If you click on share, then share screen, then entire window.
okay, do you see that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
October 6th.
Okay, so this is Conwall. This is 9 minutes and 14 seconds, and then we can just chat about this for a good chunk. If I'm curious what you'll think of this, honestly, if you've never seen it. So let's get into it.
This video here is from October 6th, 2021. I had a meeting with my manager, Conwall Gill, a principal scientist working on the vaccine formulation at Pfizer. In this meeting, I asked her if it was okay to give people another experimental injection regarding the booster shots, or if it was a drive for money.
So are we,
But we are still
like, do we
good at it.
know that, like, I mean, just thinking, like, ethically, like, is it okay to, like, give people another experimental injection? Like, are we sure it's gonna be safe and effective? Or are we just rolling these out because we wanna roll them out for money? Like,
Yeah. This is a real time data that we are generating. We don't even know. When we started vaccinating people, we had no idea how it's going to look like.
yeah,
mRNA vaccines have been there for 50 years, no, but nothing made to clinical. Why? Because mRNA vaccines have been known to have side effects.
right.
Moderna has been working on it for 10 years. This is not the new thing, right? But why it did not reach trial was because of all these side effects. We, Pfizer and Moderna, used the emergency and the pandemic to kind of get through it now.
Okay.
But we didn't. But even CDC noted we don't
So
have
it can
data.
never get FDA approved until we had this emergency, right? Like, we had to try something new. So, but why didn't we try, like, a vaccine formulation that has been effective in the past, like with egg yolk or something that they use with flu, right? I don't know.
Yeah, so we here did not do it because we already have collaboration with BioNTech on flu before actually COVID happened. So mRNA. So what the story behind we starting on this, because BioNTech guy Ugur Sahin, the BioNTech CEO, he called Catherine Jensen.
Sahin.
Yeah, he called Catherine Jensen and he's like, hey, I have this technology, but I don't have resources to make it big. So Catherine was like, well, we had a collaboration in place before for flu. So we wanted to give it a shot. It is a new mRNA thing. Nobody knew anything about it. We never had this. Everything is just fresh from last
Kind of like
year.
learning on the fly.
So it was on a fly. Pandemic, just roll it out. There was no time to think. It was a time to act.
Who Conwall was mentioning in this clip is Catherine Jensen, the former head of vaccine research and development at Pfizer.
I'm Catherine Jansen. I develop vaccines which help millions of people around the world to be protected from nasty and deadly infections. Currently, I'm developing a vaccine candidate to help prevent COVID-19.
In an interview in 2020, Catherine confirmed what Conwall was saying, where she fully admitted that Pfizer was flying the plane as they were building it. This is a huge admission as to the nature of the so-called science that was happening behind the scenes.
The most chilling thing for me was when we walked our dog and we go by the hospital complexes and you see one refrigerated truck after the other appearing in the parking lots in front of the hospitals.
The refrigerator truck morgues.
Morgues, right. It was just chilling, absolutely chilling. That was absolutely fueling the desire to come up with the vaccine, no matter what it takes.
This was kind of personal.
It became very personal. I saw this as an enemy.
The virus.
The virus. I took this very personally. I wanted to fight it, beat it, fight it down. It was, nothing else mattered.
I also have the transcript of audio that I obtained on October 28th, 2021, from the former head of pediatric formulations, Bakul Bhatangar, reiterating what Catherine and Conwell were saying, claiming once again that they were building the plane as they were starting to fly it. Conwell then goes on to say that the vaccine was not so effective and says that the mRNA and LNPs are very sneaky.
Only Johnson & Johnson side effect came out quickly, like there was a clot that was happening with Johnson & Johnson's.
Right.
But other than that, mRNA and LNP are very sneaky, I think. We are not still seeing a lot of like huge complications.
She goes on to highlight how the clinical trials completely skipped normal clinical trials and went straight up, all at once, to phase 3.
There are 3 types of trials, right? Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We just went straight up. Right?
Yeah.
We just did this. But this is why it takes 10 years for a vaccine to come out.
Yeah.
It takes years of, observation, blah, 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 1, then 2 and 3. Here we are doing everything at the same time. So everybody is as puzzled.
Yeah.
Nobody has 100, even CEO, Pfizer CEO and even Ugo Sahin won't have answers. Because they are like looking at it, closely watching it. At this point, that's all we can do. And I feel like, it's also becoming a money game. This is where it started. So problem is distribution of vaccines to those populations, to those countries. By the time it reaches there, this vaccine is now not useful.
I'll ask you this one. Why are we worried about booster shots over here if we're going to, shouldn't we be giving them?
Of course, but there's so much of politics, right?
This is Ramin Davari, the pharmaceutical formulation scientist from Pfizer, one of the head honchos of the COVID-19 formulation team. This clip was from October 21st, 2021. Just listen to what he has to say about the safety issues of the vaccine.
My mother called me 2 days ago and said that her therapist's friend told her that her friend took a booster shot and died the same day, I think, in her bathroom. I don't know if it was Pfizer, but
the only booster shot so far is Pfizer.
So I mean, it must have been Pfizer, and I'm just concerned that, she was relatively old. She was 77 apparently, but I mean, it's kind of scary to me.
That's the thing. Just people die every day.
I think it's something that we should look into and make sure that the boosters are.
People are looking into it.
Yeah.
It's just not our job to look into that.
Yeah.
But there are people within Pfizer, all the political people.
Okay.
And the safety people.
Right.
There are people who are not only looking at that, actually, there are reports that come to Pfizer, zillions of them every day.
Zillions.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think Pfizer gets mad when they don't mandate it?
From a business perspective?
Yeah.
It's just like saying, you think the chips companies, they're going to get mad if somebody says chips is not good for you? Of course.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I mean,
they don't care if people just eat chips all day and die. Because their job is
to sell chips.
Engineering it the way that I take. No, it's not even selling it. It's for me to take it, basically, right? Because otherwise I won't buy it.
Right.
Yeah. So you forget about those parts of business, basically. So
yeah,
they're engineering it specifically for me to take the next one.
Right.
So increasing my consumption and increasing my consumption, guess what? It's going to affect my heart and I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about that.
Yeah, I know. That's why I don't eat chips. They're giving out free chips over there.
Yeah.
And I don't eat them because I'm like, I don't want that.
And that's
Give me a free salad.
Once you say no to it, it's very easy.
That's crazy. So
all of these.
There's one last part this might provide some context for, this part. Yeah, we can stop it there.
Cool.
I can speak on this guy. His name's Nick Warren. Once we discuss what we just listened to,
Cool.
but I thank you for letting me play that. I know you probably
No, that's all good. That's all
it's
good.
just important context for like what I want to speak on because, dude, like I rewatch that every time. Like I'll play it on shows and I just do what I just did. Like I can't believe that this is what I was like. The conversations I was having was that, and those were only two of them. Like there was way more on the inside that like we'll get into. I was unable to reobtain some information on, and you might be wondering, what do you mean reobtain? But ultimately these were the biggest things that I was able to uncover.
So
This Conwell,
how are you recording those at the time? And like, is it technically illegal to record, or is that all legit? Or yeah,
we can totally get into all of that. And so, how was I recording? Project Veritas strapped me up with cameras, and I reached out to them in late September of 2021 when James O'Keefe and Project Veritas were coming out with like these undercover stories, and Jody O'Malley is an HHS whistleblower who came forward in like mid-September, I believe, is when she came forward in 2021. And so I was inspired to reach out to them. Like I reached out to them in August. I reached out to them in September. They finally like got me on the phone and said, Justin, we want to work with you. Like we think you'll be an amazing whistleblower. Like let's blow the lid off this. And I basically hit the ground running. They gave me cameras. I met with a dude in Massachusetts, gave me undercover equipment, and I signed the contract thing, and I was on my way. And little did I know, as a 23 naive, unwitting whistleblower, that, like you just said, what I was doing was technically illegal in the eyes of the state of Massachusetts of recording consent laws. And Project Veritas didn't tell me until like 3 months after I went and did all of this. And so there's a huge gray area with everything that I've come forward with because this has never happened before where, there's recording consent laws, but I went and did what I did. And the information that I obtained, point blank, it could have saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives, and could have totally reversed the COVID-19 agenda in 2021 and saved countries from having to, mandate vaccines and whatever else that was going on back then. So to me, I stand in God's law and spiritual law of do no harm. I do not have any like malicious intent towards Conwell or Ramin, the people that I was exposing in these videos, or any of my colleagues that I was working with at Pfizer. But ultimately, I knew what was going on. I knew that these vaccines were injuring and killing people. And look at what has happened over the last 4 years.
yeah.
Right?
And
Like there's no argument.
And as you say, a lot of these people are just so heavily brainwashed in the system that they don't even realize what they're saying is kind of wrong. And, don't want to downplay these people as maybe not being smart or not having good ethics, but it's just kind of when you're so deep in that system, they don't even realize what they're saying that's actually incriminating when you just stop and break it down.
100%. And I mean, I can speak to that in the sense that I don't think that Conwell specifically, I don't think Conwell like had any malicious intent, and it truly has a kind heart and thought she was doing the right thing. I really don't think that she was like, conspiring up like a genocidal plot on the world. She thought she was participating in something that was good for the world,
Yeah.
which has merit in that sense. But ultimately, when people are, killing people essentially, or like, telling you to jump off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge? No. Like,
Yeah.
and I knew better. And so that's why I was doing what I was doing. I reached out to Project Veritas because they were like the whistleblower outlet, right? They were the organization to come forward to and expose something like crimes against humanity, literally.
Yeah.
And so they stripped me up with cameras, and I was working with their whistleblower, their investigative journalist team, and they taught me essentially how to do this in conversation, like do what they do undercover. They taught me essentially how to be like a spy or an undercover asset on the inside of Pfizer.
Yeah.
So that's how it all played out like that.
So you mentioned the lipid nanoparticle distribution data, and we know that Pfizer tried to bury the data for 75 years and that type of thing. But did you have access to any other data that proves that they knew that this was going to cause heart issues, cancer, pregnant women, all these issues we're now seeing?
I believe I did, but I gave the documents to Veritas, and they are still sitting on them. And I was silly and naive and didn't make second copies. So my whole thing is a majority of my evidence is in these videos. In my documentary, there are some documents that link to these lipid nanoparticles and the distribution. And I did also there's the Project Veritas story of talking to Jordan Tristan Walker, who was the guy who said that Pfizer's mutating COVID. There was a part 2 of that story where he talks about the menstrual cycles being affected and how that could be something that, is a blemish on Pfizer's vaccine in the future. And ultimately, yeah, I was the journalist responsible for those stories. So we can get to that as well. But unfortunately,
No, that's okay.
I can't do it again and go back in time. And I resigned without reprinting all the documents. And I essentially, when I encourage the audience to watch my documentary, it's at justintegrity.net. It's called Project Whistleblower. You can find it on Rumble and really anywhere else. And we'll put the links in the description. But ultimately, in the documentary, I talk about how I left Pfizer feeling like I had blood on my hands going to work at Project Veritas, essentially to go reobtain this information. Because, Alex, I gave these videos that we just watched, I left Pfizer without them. And I went to go work at Veritas to reobtain this stuff, to go work for them, but like be like a spy, like a counterintelligence asset against them to just get my story back.
So was that part of the contract if they were going to pay you that you had to hand over these videos and the data?
I didn't have to do that. No, I kind of just got sucked into doing it because I was too trustworthy of them. I gave it to them and I was like scared to high hell, honestly. That's point blank what it was. I thought that they were going to protect me, and then they ultimately hung me out to dry and said, we're not going to release your story. After I like went through the like most traumatizing stuff as a whistleblower I've really ever been through. It's like these conversations play back in my head all the time, dude. Like it's nightmarish stuff. So
what did Project Veritas how did you see as what they were promised they were going to do in terms of release all this? And then when did the sort of disagreement start, and when did they start saying they're not going to, and why did they say that?
So the 2 videos we just watched were dated October 6th and October 21st of 2021. Those were 2 important dates just for timeline purposes. And then in my documentary as well, on October 14th of 2021, I took the vials out of the lab and I transported them with the Project Veritas journalist team from Massachusetts to New York. I gave the journalists the files, and then they drove over state lines to look at them under a microscope with Dr. Carrie Madej, who is a whistleblower doctor. I'm sure you've heard of her. She's been on InfoWars and many other shows. So I met Carrie Madej that night with no expectation of meeting her. She just was there. Like the journalist team didn't tell me that she was going to be there. They just said they had a doctor who was going to look at the vials. And like this all stemmed from my thought. I was like, I'm going to look at these under a microscope. Let's do this, guys. And so they set this whole thing up, and there were cameras everywhere. And like, there was a live feed of like looking at these vials under a microscope. So that was actually before this Ramin video with the chip metaphor guy who, talked about zillions of people dying and everything else. So that was a big thing that was part of all of this, where Carrie Madej came forward breaking NDA with Veritas as a source. She broke NDA and kind of whistle blew on Stu Peters' show, actually, where she went on his show talking about these files and the contents that we saw, and didn't name drop me, but she said Project Veritas is working with the Pfizer whistleblower on his show. And so that came out on October 20, like the same day basically as this Ramin video that we just watched. And so that to me was like a target on my back, and I didn't really know what to think, and the journalist team didn't really know what to think either. And so then 2 weeks after that, I'm still waiting to like hear like, when is my story going to get released? Like, come on, I've been doing this for like over a month now. Like, I know I have a story that can help people. Project Veritas got raided by the FBI on November 4th and November 6th of 2021 due to Ashley Biden's diary being stolen. And the longer that this like keeps dragging out, like immediately, Alex, I thought that it was suspect timing, to say the least, because of what I was doing and because of what Carrie Madej did going on Stu Peters' show. The episode that she did got upwards of 100,000 views, I think, at least in a couple weeks. And she was also just outspoken on multiple platforms about what was going down. And so ultimately, it's not like millions of people saw it, but it had enough traction to the point where people were potentially expecting something. Like, she literally said Project Veritas is working with the Pfizer whistleblower. And so, boom, FBI raid happened 2 weeks later. Highly suspicious. And then I actually obtained more content where the guy on the screen that was remaining from the videos that I just showed you, his name is Nick Warren. He's the vice president at Pfizer of Biotherapeutics and Pharmaceutical Sciences. I talked to this guy after he went to the FDA VRBAC meeting. VRBAC standing for Vaccines and Research of like Biomedical Development Products. VRBAC, I don't know what it means verbatim. I can look it up real quick, but essentially it was the FDA approval, Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Board. That's what it stands for. So this was in 2023. October 26th is when this guy went on the emergency use meeting for the FDA and Pfizer, essentially to approve the emergency use authorization for 5 to 11-year-olds. And so what Pfizer was doing was criminal, where there were 2 different vaccine formulations that Pfizer was doing research and development on, which is what I did in formulations. So I was working on this point blank. Like, no one could take that away from me. I was working on these 2 products. One is called the Tris buffer. The other one is called the phosphate buffer saline, or PBS buffer. The phosphate buffer saline vaccine was only able to be stored at minus 80 degrees Celsius, right? Where I'm not sure if your audience is familiar, but a lot of people are familiar with the fact that these vaccines had to be stored at minus 80 degrees Celsius. And that just is a red flag to a lot of people. It was a red flag to me. Like, that's certainly a biologic. It means something could certainly be in the vaccine that, is alive, or, who knows? I'm speculating, but so then there's the Tris buffer, which was also stored at minus 80 degrees Celsius at first, but ultimately, once thawed to room temperature, it could then be stored at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, which is essentially a walk-in refrigerator type temperature. Yeah. The problem with that is that the minus 80 degrees Celsius PBS vaccine was the one that was clinically tested and put into people's arms, where the Tris buffer was not put into anybody's arms and then FDA approved because of bioequivalence data based off of like the buffer system, and saying that, well, all the other ingredients are the same, so it should be fine. But ultimately, this is not up to par. If there was no emergency use authorization, this never would have happened. And they ultimately used this fake pandemic virus situation to scapegoat this emergency use authorization to not do any clinical data on a vaccine and approve it and put it into 5 to 11-year-olds and essentially run a worldwide clinical trial blindly without doing any actual data. That's a crime against humanity.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the red flags were going off as soon as, we realized mRNA has never been used in humans before. And then for them to come out and say it's safe for like pregnant women and kids, which we always protect the most, it's like you cannot say that. You've got no idea the long-term effects or whatever. So that to me was just the straight up red flag. But do you think those storage methods, and because one of the things we've seen is huge intra-batch variability. Hopefully got a New Zealand doctor coming on who had one batch where 50% of people died within a year. And then we've seen other batches where it's basically zero side effects. So what do you think about intra-batch variability?
I mean, people have asked me this before, and I certainly believe it exists. I'm not going to deny it exists. If you go to, I think it's what'sinmybatch.com or what'sinmybatch.org, where if you look up the batch numbers, some batches are way more harmful than others.
Yeah.
So what evidence did I have of that in real time? Some in the sense that the batches that were linked to this thing called LMS or late migrating species with the RNA and like degradation could have been linked to a more harmful batch, but I'm essentially just speculating here.
Yeah, okay.
Where I didn't have any hard evidence of that when I was working with Project Veritas, like that the LMS heavy vaccine batches were more harmful.
Yeah.
My hypothesis is essentially that if you're going to take part in a worldwide vaccination effort and knowingly commit genocide, essentially, and insert harmful product across the world, wouldn't you also have some that are essentially a placebo saline vaccine, as well as, you have one vaccine that's placebo or your control,
Yeah.
make that 25 to 40%, maybe 50%, even 60% of the population worldwide. And then you make it 20 to 30% of the more harmful version. And then you have your maybe 10 to 20% of like an absolute, basically death shot. That is something that puts you out of your misery in like 2 days, something like that. Because, I mean, even the elicitation that I used in that conversation with Ramin of my mom's friend, her mother dying after taking the booster shot, was a real story. It literally happened. Like, this woman died within like 4 to 12 hours of taking the vaccine back in 2021. So I was using a real world elicitation, a real world example as to what was going on. And so just to speak to that, I mean, to me, that goes to show, like, first off, her body itself probably was not in tip-top shape ultimately to deal with the poison that she was about to, put into herself.
Yeah.
But also the way that these vaccines were manufactured, certainly some of them were manufactured in a way where, there's, likely graphene oxide or graphene oxide like substances in these vaccines that are ultimately causing these microclots in the circulatory system, which is causing all of these blood clots that embalmers are pulling out of people's necks or their groins or whatever else areas, in their shoulders. And
I've got an Aussie doctor coming on soon that's been looking at the nanotech under microscopes and stuff as well. So I'm looking forward to showing the audience all that.
Well, my perspective on the nanotechnology is a bit different than the mainstream whistleblowers in the sense that I believe that there is some Internet of Bodies agenda going on here, but I'm not certainly bought into the fact that there are microchips in these vaccines, or like some. Could there be nanotechnology? Sure, but I'm not sure that it's like microchips essentially.
I completely agree.
Like,
I'm open to whatever it could, but there's something going on.
There is something in the system, the drug delivery. It's like a drug delivery system, and the nanotechnology is certainly involved in that, and the lipid nanoparticles themselves are carcinogenic and are not safe to be putting into you. So that's a fact. And then, yeah, I think that there is some fear mongering behind like the nano, like the nano microchip thing that like people have been outspoken about, and I won't name drop people, but there have been PhD researchers who look under the microscope and they're saying that it's like a microchip that's like self-assembling, but ultimately I feel like I've listened to other perspectives and some people are saying it's essentially just saline in water, and that it's a lot of fear-based propaganda that people are pushing out as well, which can be harmful. So
100%, and that's why we've got to have these conversations to get to the bottom of it and find out what is going on for sure.
Yeah, but I mean the graphene oxide thing I think is legitimate, and there is certainly an Internet of Bodies type agenda going on.
Absolutely.
So I won't discredit that part of what's going on with the vaccines. I'm not sure if it's like a self-assembling like microchip thing that goes on in your brain. I think it's
good.
I think it's more in the circulatory system, which is where we're seeing the blood clots, and certainly brain fog happens as well from like poisoning yourself.
Yeah.
So
is there anything else before we maybe get into the some more O'Keefe Veritas stuff that came up? Is there anything else that's really important for people to know in terms of Pfizer and the side effects, or just encourage people to watch the documentary to get more details?
In terms of Pfizer, no. And then, I mean, the next whole thing is just me going to work at Veritas. I got trained. Like, so basically, the transition from me going to work at Veritas was being told in December of 2021 that I wasn't going to be able to be a whistleblower. And so I basically told O'Keefe that kids are going to die because we're not doing this. Like I basically said, I could care less about your, recording consent laws, bro. Like this is going to impact so many people if we don't move forward with this. And their excuse was like, we need to save Veritas. I have to save, all of the parents that have kids and jobs and everything else, which I mean, certainly could be looked at as a valid excuse, but I mean, the whole thing is such a gray area, and the argument that I have is if you weren't gonna do it when I obtained the information that we just showed on this show, then what did I have to obtain? What would have been a bar that I would have had to obtain? Because ultimately, if I was doing something that was not up to par with your legal team in the first place, then why did we do it in the first place? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
So they offered me the job, and I stayed at Pfizer for 4 months, and then I resigned. I was naive. I didn't reprint any data. I reobtained some of it. But we'll get into of like when I worked at Veritas, I was able to reobtain some stuff, like reobtain these videos that we essentially just watched. So
when you did go to work for them and they said they weren't going to put it out at this stage, what else were they going to have you kind of working on?
First things first was learning undercover journalism and learning investigative journalism and learning like open source intelligence. And open source intelligence is very easy. Literally anybody can do it. All you have to do is have a computer and the internet and search engines and know how to use them and know how to use several search engines. And then I'd say you can just, basically subscribe to things like been verified or, other forms of way to look people up essentially. And then, a lot of what I was doing was, unfortunately, it was, I'm a straight man, and I would have to expose myself to going on undercover meetings with men who were either bisexual or gay, because that's how this undercover journalism world works, especially at Project Veritas, where I was encouraged essentially to, take a phone, download the dating apps, and then put my search on for everybody, not just women, so and I had the premiums, so I could basically get as many swipes as I wanted to, and I was just looking for job titles, and I had like 600 dudes all at once, and I had like 20 women on certain areas. So it's kind of funny, but like, a guy like me, like I'm getting matched with all these dudes with, all these high up CEO job titles, and I couldn't find a single woman that like wanted to really go out with me. I went on like one or two meetings with this one journalist girl who I'll keep her nameless because she was harmless, but um yeah, man, it was funny because that's how it was, like almost from the get-go. I mean, we did investigations as a team as well, but like when I was alone and just doing my own investigative journalism work, a lot of it was this undercover, like basically pretending to be gay and feminine and flamboyant stuff, which I did not enjoy because I'm more of a masculine guy, so it was traumatic, honestly.
Do you? Yeah, that's interesting as well. We seem to be seeing a lot of that coming out with some, like the blackmail rings and all that. It's often, got bisexuals, homosexuals involved. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, and there's plenty of our audience that are good people, but it seems to be a bit of a trend in terms of that blackmail and getting people caught and that sort of thing. Was that a theme for all of Project Veritas, do you think?
So not all of my colleagues did that type of work. Like the girls, they would go out with guys, because they just could, they had the access. That's essentially what undercover journalism is getting access to people. And so I just had access to more guys.
Yeah.
And so that's what I had to lead into, essentially, to like keep my position and keep my access to people at Project Veritas that I essentially was doing my own investigating of and building this rapport with, essentially to get my Pfizer story back. And so not everything I did was gay. It's just I also did lean into it. Like I literally pierced my ears for like a year or so. Like this one specifically, my left one. I pierced both, and I had both for like a couple weeks, and I hated it, dude. I absolutely hated it, just because I don't know. I didn't like how it looked, but I needed to lean into it in the sense of like going on these meetings
Yeah.
with these guys. Like I needed something that like maybe made me gay, because I got questioned on these meetings like, are you even gay, dude? And I was like, oh god, I'm kind of caught.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. No, I get you.
that's kind of what it was.
Do you think most of their operations are legit, or do you think like a lot of it is set up, or any of it, or how do you sort of view it now?
Great question. And to answer it, it's such a gray area, man. Like I got trained on how to do this stuff. Like it took me like 6 or 7 months really to like get a story, right? So the first story I got was out of Philadelphia, where it was like a voting story, and it had to do with like voting integrity essentially. And I had this nice Asian lady. She was a Democrat, basically like showing me how to vote and like pointing at a thing. And like, that was a story to James, right? A big story, pushing the voting agenda, because voting solves things clearly.
Yeah.
So, but then shortly after that, I got my Jordan Walker story, which is, the biggest story actually in company history. Are you familiar with the Jordan Walker story? The
Oh, no, not
Pfizer
off the top of my head.
Pfizer's mutating COVID story. I'll pull it up, and I'll just I'll I want you to understand the context of where I'm coming from with the story. We don't have to watch it. I'll just speak to it.
Yeah.
But basically, Jordan Walker, his job title was mRNA scientific planner at Pfizer. He came over from Boston Consulting Group, and he started working at Boston Consulting Group in like 2021, I believe, at the start of the COVID pandemic. And he came over to Pfizer in like 2022 or so. And so he was working at Pfizer for about a year when I sat down with this guy. And to answer your question on whether these meetings were legitimate, My answer to that question is legit. I do not know because I feel like it could go either way, and I will explain why. This guy, Jordan Walker, right, mRNA scientific planner, I came across him on Bumble through a colleague of mine. So there was this intern that I worked with, and he was this, college kid essentially who was working with Project Veritas at the time. And we had a field ops director whose code name was Jitsu, Mike Spadone. Jitsu had the intern swiping in the New York City area. So he was swiping in Queens, which is where Jordan Walker supposedly lived. And so he came across his profile and got liked by this guy, Jordan Walker, who was like 27 or something, 28. And he thought that I was the great candidate essentially to go sit in front of this guy. So he sent my profile, or he sent Jordan's profile to me. So I did not organically swipe on this guy. His profile was sent to me, and then I swiped on him, and then boom, we matched. So to me, that leaves some more gray area of like, okay, like, was that all planned? Because then I sat down in front of this guy and I didn't say anything about work for like 40 to 45 minutes. And he starts talking about how Pfizer is mutating COVID. And, one thing led to another, and this story blew up. It was the biggest story that they've ever done. I'm trying to pull it up right now so that you understand the context. But essentially, it's the biggest story Project Veritas ever did. It got 50 million views in the matter of like a week or so, and it got like 40 million views in like 3 days.
Yeah, as you say, when you hear stuff like this, it makes you wonder how much of this is kind of like a distraction away from the real issues, as you're saying, and like a bit of a setup. Yeah.
Well, Alex, so my whole thing too is, and I don't want to necessarily derail any conversation between you and I, but I myself embody the terrain perspective where I am, I went through all the science, indoctrination, and everything else, and I have gone down the essential rabbit hole of what really is virology and understanding like what makes us sick. And to me, there is zero evidence that not only COVID-19, this SARS-CoV-2 virus, doesn't exist, but really any virus has not actually been proven to exist based off of the scientific method and what these scientists and so-called virologists have done over the last like 120 years to prove that, viruses like HIV or coronavirus, any coronavirus you can name, or
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with terrain theory.
influenza, all of them are essentially, it's all fear-based propaganda based off of a concoction that they make in these cell culture experiments, and then they ultimately just are saying like they take a picture of it, and then there's this black thing on the cell culture plate, and they're like, that's the virus, where they never isolate the virus from the human snot in the first place, which is where all the fraud starts.
Yeah.
And
No, I'm familiar with terrain theory. And for people at home, it is a bit of a maze of how, you get a virus and, as you say, put it in a petri dish, put it in there with other things, and then isolate it, and computer models reconstruct the genome, and this is the virus or the variant. It's all a bit wishy-washy, which is something that I'm on the fence on still either way about exactly what is science and what is real. But I completely agree with the theory that our bodies have toxins that they need to purge, and a lot of what we call illness and disease is just your body getting rid of everything that's from our environment, our food, water, and air these days.
for sure. So I'll just play like the beginning, like 20-30 seconds of this, just so you understand the context of this story, and you might actually recognize what's going on.
I do recognize him now you've said it. Yeah.
Do you recognize this guy? So I'll play it for the audience just so that they understand. But this is Jordan Walker. I did this undercover meeting with him, and he is mRNA scientific planner at Pfizer.
COVID? Well, that is not. Pfizer ultimately is thinking about mutating COVID. Well, that is not what we say to the public. No, don't tell anyone this. You probably don't tell. You probably don't tell anyone. Okay? We're exploring like now. You know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is like why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we can create unfavorably develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of like, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses. You have to be like very controlled to make sure that this virus that you mutate doesn't create something that like goes everywhere.
Something crazy.
Is the way that the virus started and moving on. To be honest, like it makes no sense that this virus popped out of nowhere. Like,
Yeah, I know.
Meet Jordan Tristan Walker, a director of research and development strategic operations and mRNA scientific planning at Pfizer.
It sounds like gain of function to me.
I don't know. It's a little bit different. I think it's different. It's like it's definitely not gain of function.
It sounds like it is. I mean, it's okay.
No. So directed evolution is very different. Well, you're not supposed to do gain.
So that's like the first minute of this expose that I was responsible for. And I mean, you can hear my voice. This was obviously me saying Pfizer's ultimately thinking about mutating COVID. And then if you like scroll through, you can like kind of see my head actually right here in the mirror behind him. So that's just, more evidence behind me being there. But so, Alex, from my perspective, I'll just share my perspective. I'm not pushing, my whole viruses don't exist thing on you. I have been of this mindset for quite a while. And I was embodying the terrain perspective before even sitting down with this guy, Jordan Walker. And I was really waking up to the fact that if there is no virus, how can you mutate a virus? And so I thought that it was just really eye-opening that this guy was, talking about this as in real time. Like I was waking up to the fact that, it's entirely possible that viruses themselves don't exist. So how can you mutate it? And then there's this hidden war essentially that I learned about over the last year or so in that time, that there is a real fight to wake up the alternative community or the freedom community to the fact that you can't mutate a virus, because that's where this whole gain of function agenda comes from. And where you need ivermectin and all these other drugs that ultimately, if there's no virus, then why would you need ivermectin? That's where the nitty gritty of psychological operations go.
Yeah.
Where this leads to lockstep with Rockefeller, where in 2010, they had this lockstep agenda where they knew that people weren't going to be taking this vaccine that they're pushing on the world. So they're going to get all the freedom fighters to take ivermectin, which is also linked to infertility, which I'm not sure if you've come across.
Yeah, I've come across that. Yeah.
So
well, I guess, like I said, I think they make some very interesting arguments. I guess the thing I'd want to find out is when we have kids used to all have chickenpox parties. So if one kid gets chickenpox, all the kids go there and they all get it. So then to me, it's well, is that a bacterial thing, fungal, parasitic, or if it's not a virus? These are the sort of things that I just want to see more actual real science around to clear this argument one way or another.
For sure. And to me, from my perspective, the way to explain that would be that if you're poisoned essentially with a chickenpox vaccine or something else, you are going to express symptoms. Your body needs to excrete the poison. What better way to do that than through the skin and creating bumps on the skin? And some might argue, okay, well, my kid wasn't vaccinated or something, or whatever else, and they still had chickenpox. Well, this is a rabbit hole conversation that we could go down, but there's the discussion of contagion itself, and that ultimately not being proven, where there is the biofield of the biofields are what there's 12 layers of energy fields around us, according to people that do sound healing, like Eileen McCusick. She is a expert in the biofield, and the theory with the biofield, and I'm calling it a theory, but germ theory too is also a theory. There's no such thing as the germ model. right? Because it's actually never been proven. No virus has ever been actually proven to exist, and all of these germs have not actually been proven to cause disease. And there is evidence behind all of this. It's just we are all dissolving these illusions. The explanation behind the biofield is that, say, this chickenpox party happens. There's 9 kids who get together for a chickenpox party, and say 4 of them get sick. Well, why didn't the 5 other ones get sick? And ultimately, it's the biofields are potentially communicating with each other, and like we're all made of water as well.
Yeah.
And I contribute this testimony as well to my friend and colleague Alex Zek of The Way Forward, where he's a podcaster in the United States, and the work of Veda Austin is linked to water and studying water. And so what she does is she freezes water, and water can actually communicate with us.
Yeah.
And so I haven't interviewed her or anything. I've watched interviews with her, but the long story short is essentially when you freeze water, it will communicate to you in like a positive manner, or sometimes it can be a negative manner. And so ultimately, that's like where vibes come in. That's where, if you have a biofield itself that is essentially corrupted, it can communicate to other people's biofields essentially to shed, right? Like that's what vaccine shedding is to me, is like your biofield was corrupted and it's telling so-and-so like, oh, my menstrual cycle is messed up. Tell this person's menstrual cycle to be all messed up because of the vaccine as well. So that's where the shedding all comes into play. That's all my perspective. I'm not here to push this on anybody, but it's a perspective that I feel like needs to be heard, because if we don't wake up to this, from how I see it, I feel like we are going down a path that will lead us to what is gonna happen again. Like we don't wake up to the fact that the terrain is a possibility, and the fact that there is no germ that actually was making us sick in 2020 and 2021, and that this was all propagated by fear in the media, and they were inducing people dying in hospitals because of drugs like remdesivir and insert drug here, like really any drug. If there is no virus or germ that is making us sick, then they're all technically poison.
Yeah.
So,
and we saw that. Yeah, we saw that with the with the ventilators and giving midazolam and morphine and all that type of stuff as well. But just what's next for you then, mate? Or where do you want to take the conversation for people now? Is there anything we haven't touched on you feel is important?
I think we can move towards the whole James O'Keefe going to Bohemian Grove and then just wrap up.
Yeah. For those that aren't familiar, I think most people are familiar with Bohemian Grove now and the big meetings of the elites and the big burning owl and these rituals and all the stuff. We've covered a lot of this on the channel. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I did this Pfizer story with Jordan Walker. We just showed a little bit of it, and I am speaking to how I feel like it was essentially propaganda in a way, from my perspective. And I didn't feel like it was that powerful, and I felt like it was unjust to call that story bombshell versus the information that I was obtaining on the inside as an actual whistleblower. So I thought it was just crazy, right? Like all that. And then to go to O'Keefe Media Group, I got invited to go to O'Keefe Media Group after I resigned from Project Veritas in March of 2023. And then I went to go work for James like the following day or two at O'Keefe Media Group, because he needed journalists to essentially go work for him. So I worked for him for about 5 months. And in July of 2023 is when there was rumblings essentially that James was going to Bohemian Grove. And my heart was broken before he even went. And so the journalist team that I worked with, we knew that he was going, and so we let him go organically. And then he came back and was silent about the whole thing. And then I essentially, I think it's worth playing just a little bit of the admission. and I can show on the screen, Alex, this tent slip that I obtained when I was at his house in New Jersey. So I went essentially to go meet with the intern, just go work in New Jersey for a day at the office. Like the house was the office. James wasn't there. I was with the intern, and it just so happened that James received mail with his Bohemian Grove tent slip, and the intern, Carrot Top, threw it down right in front of me on my laptop when I was working, and I was blown away. I was shocked. I didn't think it was real, but it was. And then he went and like was flinging it around. He's like, "Can you believe this?" And I said I couldn't, and I said I don't want to see that, And then he basically went and put it on the table by the bathroom, like in a room or two back. And then I just went to the bathroom and I took pictures of it. I wish I took a video of it, obviously, because it would have been even better. But I took pictures of it, and then 2 weeks after that, James called me after I went on vacation and I got back from vacation. He was confronted by my colleagues, and then James, like I had a conversation with my colleague Alicia Gamble. Her code name was Nightingale. She said that James wants to talk to me about Bohemian Grove, and so I basically knew that it was coming, and I decided to record the call. And he said, I went to this Bohemian club, and it's upset people. I want to see how you're feeling, see how you're doing. What do you feel about this? And I just, that was the pivot moment for me, essentially, to like reveal my truth, that I was done. I was not going to work for him anymore. And I was done with the lies and the manipulation, and that was it, so, it's so heavy ultimately, like to
So
like have lived through
why
this.
do you think he went there? Was he hoping to get some good scoops undercover, or do you think he's part of the club, or what do you make of it?
I'll play it for you. He'll actually speak to that if you want to listen.
Yeah.
You want to hear it?
How long's this clip?
Proceed.
I'll just fast forward to this part. All right, so here's the tent slip. I'm only it'll be like a minute to max, and then we'll wrap up.
Perfect.
James O'Keefe came clean to me and called me saying,
I went to this Bohemian club and it's upset people. So I just wanted to hear from you and kind of take your temperature and see how you're feeling, see how you're doing. Like, what's going through your mind?
James, how did you even get invited there? And like, it's the most powerful secret society in the world.
I feel like my own team is like eliciting me and challenging me and questioning me. And I think I was just a guest. I didn't see anything wrong there. Some of our people that I've known for many years were there. If I saw something, I would tell you, but I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories and stuff, and I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything that crossed the line, or anything like that. Some strange things, but nothing like what's portrayed by like Alex Jones or anyone else, as far as I can see. And there's a lot of people that support us that are involved in that.
So that was the answer to your question, essentially, to me. That here, I'm going to stop screen sharing. That's the answer to your question, that he's saying that supporters of us are involved in that.
Yeah, like that makes no sense to me. Like, if he had said, I'm going on an undercover to try and dig up dirt, but pretend when you're in this world exposing corruption, to pretend that there's nothing dodgy going on there, or that you want to hang out with those people, like, that just doesn't add up.
100%, dude. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
That's the simple, short answer. And for those who want to like dig into all of it, there's so much more in my documentary too. Just like my testimony is, there were two whistleblower stories that we weren't able to touch on. And even after the fact, the day I released this documentary, my old colleague reached out to me, and like sent me pictures of the whole 2023 member list of everyone that was there. So that's on my website too, if everyone wants to go check it out.
Yeah.
I haven't really had the time. Like, I mean, I've had the time. That's an excuse, but like, I haven't been able to like go through and do all the OSINT and like, expose these people. It's names on a list for people to go see and check out for themselves. And I've been on like 50 or 60 something podcasts at this point in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And I've actually like been on InfoWars, been on Alex Jones. I went on American Journal. And I brought this up to Alex. Like I brought up the whole Bohemian Grove thing to Alex, and he like turned on like some different face. He like it almost pooped his pants in a way. Sorry to say that, but he wasn't expecting me to say that, and to me, like, he was gonna invite me back on that Sunday. I interviewed with him on a Friday. He said, "We'll have you back on Sunday," and then I like tried to coordinate a meeting with their team, and they just ignored me.
Yeah.
And so that to me speaks volumes about like what these people in the alternative media do. They are all about optics. They're all about pushing a narrative. They're all about divide and conquer, like dividing us within the political aisles. That's what they want, because that's what the corporations want. That's what these fascists want. The people that are like pushing this technocracy with Palantir and everything else. Like, please do not think that I'm a Trump supporter because I was working in the right-wing alternative media. I am the biggest like anarchist, like a peaceful anarchist. I'm not like burn it to the ground or whatever, but like we need a new system is how I feel about all of this. And that's really what I say on like all these shows is I'm very apolitical. I do not believe in the left or the right. Although, I mean, do we need some form of government? Like maybe. I believe in voluntarism. Like you should be able to participate in how you see as fit. Like if you want to go vote, I suppose go vote, but like the whole thing is entirely corrupt based off of what I've witnessed.
I completely agree. That's our message for people as well.
So,
are you familiar with Dr. Mike Yeadon, and he's done that?
Yeah, I've had a private conversation with Dr. Mike Yeadon. I haven't had a public conversation with him. I would love to. Jamie Andrews actually connected me with him. If you have his contact, I would love to connect with him again. I have his Telegram or something somewhere. Where I did have a private conversation with him, and he did put it on his Telegram channel. And said that he did speak to me and said, I think Justin's legit. He doesn't even want anything from me. He just, he wanted to connect with me.
Sounds like he's stepped away from it all after that video he did called A Final Warning. That was really good. It sounds like he's in that video. He sort of said, "I'm sick of doing interviews. I've said everything I need to say. It's up to people to wake up now."
Dude, I mean, who could blame him? The guy's been through a lot. I mean, he's been a president at Pfizer for 20 something years, and he's been speaking out since 2019, 2020 through all of it. And so, I'm here to carry the torch for the Pfizer whistleblowers. I don't plan on stopping with these interviews. I mean, sure, it takes a lot of time and energy sometimes, but like, if I can help wake up one person from using my voice, like that's all God is asking me to do, is just continue to share my story, because it truly is a gift to like wake people up to a lot of corruption that we didn't exactly expect. Like I didn't expect any of this, like to, see it, especially in the alternative media that people trust, Like, it's really unfortunate. Like David Icke calls it, I'm not sure if you've heard of him speak of it, but he calls it the MAMIC, like the mainstream alternative media industrial complex. And it's essentially like all linked to like DARPA and NSA and, all the 3-letter agencies. Essentially, it's the new age of Operation Mockingbird through like military intelligence and private military intelligence and Blackwater Eric Prince, if you've heard of him, like it is entirely corrupt, and they know a lot. And like I'm certainly on some list, that's for sure. Like this story, it's a gift from God in the sense that I just have to continue sharing it so that it's like it's a double-edged sword, because if these people were to like, I've come after them publicly, and I'm like doing, and we can get into the lawsuits of crimes against humanity for a little bit, in the sense that like I filed affidavits. I said, this is what happened. Like you all committed genocide on the world, and they are ignoring me. And so like, to me, I kind of expected it, but like, I'm just, looking to like form a team, like looking to find the right lawyers still to like work with and just make change happen. But is change really going to happen within this system, within this court system that is entirely corrupt, that is protecting the elites? I'm really not sure. Ultimately, moving forward with these court systems is just exposing them in a way.
Yeah.
But
I think that there's so many people speaking up now bravely that we kind of hit this escape point where now there's so many people on TikTok, smaller independent podcasts, and a lot of this stuff you can even talk about now on YouTube that you couldn't say a few years ago. So I think there's just so many, holes now that they can't sort of patch the ship, and the truth is going to come out no matter what. But it is good to see, Albert Bourla and Bill Gates been sued in the Netherlands, but then they arrested that lawyer that was suing them. But we are getting there. People are waking up, and I don't think they're going to be able to get away with this forever.
It's that consciousness of people just realizing like, hey, we're all created by God, and we don't need to like work 9 to 5s, and the devaluation of money and everything is happening at an all-time rate. Like, why did God put us on this earth? Yes. Was it really to pay bills, my friends, or was it to really just sit with love and be authentic and love your neighbor and live with authenticity? That's what I preach on these podcasts that I go on. So
100%. Well, mate, that's probably a great place to wrap up. Guys, I'll put Justin's Twitter, his website, links to the documentary and everything down below. But, mate, I wish you all the best, and we'll have you back on in future, and keep in touch if there's anything else I can do for you.
Yeah, man, I'd love to come back on. Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
you, brother.